Two complete strangers walked into a psychology lab in 1997. They had never met. They had no idea why they'd been paired together. 45 minutes later, they walked out. And 6 months after that, they got married. And here's the part that should make you sit up. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't chemistry. It wasn't fate. It was a procedure. A repeatable, documented, scientific procedure that you can run tonight at your kitchen table with anyone you choose. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how it works. But before I give it to you, I need you to answer one uncomfortable question. Think of the person closest to you. Your partner, your best friend, your mother, whoever came to mind first. Now tell me, when was the last time you had a conversation with them that actually mattered? Not how was work, not did you pay the electric bill, not what do you want for dinner? I mean a real conversation, the kind where time disappears, where you learn something about them that genuinely surprises you, where you hang up or walk away feeling like you just got closer to another human being. Be honest, was it last week, last month? Was it years ago? If you had to think hard about it, you're not broken, and neither is your relationship. You've just run into one of the strangest paradoxes of human connection. Time together does not create closeness. Let that land for a second, because it goes against everything we assume. We think intimacy is something that accumulates automatically, like dust on a shelf. Stay in the same house long enough, share a bed long enough, raise kids together long enough, and closeness just happens. Except it doesn't. There are couples who've spent 30 years under one roof and know each other's coffee orders, sleep schedules, and annoying habits in encyclopedic detail, and yet have no idea what the other person is afraid of, what they'd change about their life, or what they secretly still dream about. They're not partners. They're extremely well-informed roommates. And this isn't just my opinion. It's one of the most consistent findings in the science of relationships. The Harvard study of adult development, the longest-running study of human happiness in history, has been tracking people's lives since 1938, over 8 decades. Its current director, psychiatrist Robert Waldinger, summarized the results in his book, The Good Life. And the conclusion is brutal in its simplicity. The single biggest predictor of how happy and how healthy you'll be at 80 isn't your cholesterol, your salary, or your gym routine. It's the quality, not the quantity, the quality of your relationships. Which means the difference between a life that feels rich and a life that feels empty might literally come down to whether you know how to have one real conversation. So why don't we? Here's the answer nobody wants to hear. Because nobody ever taught us. We spend 12 years in school learning algebra we'll never use, and not 1 hour learning how to ask another human being a question that goes deeper than, "So, what do you do?" We're not distant because we've run out of things to say. We're distant because we literally don't know how to get past the surface. We keep knocking on the same door. Weather, work, weekend plans, and wondering why it never opens. Which brings us back to that lab in 1997. The man behind the experiment was Arthur Aron, a psychologist at Stony Brook University, who had spent his career studying a question most scientists considered untouchable. How does closeness between two people actually form? Not in poetry, not in movies. Mechanically, step by step. Aron had a suspicion that intimacy wasn't magic. It was a process. And if it was a process, it could be engineered. So he and his colleagues designed a test. They took pairs of total strangers, sat them face to face, and handed them a list of 36 questions, divided into 3 sets. The instructions were simple. Take turns, answer honestly, both of you respond to every question. 45 minutes. That's it. The results were published in a paper with a title that sounds almost like a confession. The Experimental Generation of Interpersonal Closeness. Generation. Not observation, generation. After just 45 minutes, strangers reported feeling closer to the person across the table than they felt to some people they'd known their entire lives. Some pairs became friends. Some kept meeting. And yes, one pair from the broader research program ended up married, with the entire lab invited to the wedding. Years later, a writer named Mandy Len Catron tried the questions on a date and described what happened in a New York Times essay called "To Fall in Love with Anyone, Do This." It went viral, millions of readers, and she too ended up falling in love. The internet called it a trick. It's not a trick. It's a blueprint. Now, how? Why do 36 questions do what 30 years of cohabitation sometimes can't? When you take the list apart, you find two principles hiding inside it. And honestly, these two principles are worth more than the questions themselves. Because once you understand them, you can build closeness in almost any conversation for the rest of your life. Principle 1. Escalation. The questions start light and get progressively deeper. And that's not politeness, that's architecture. You can't open a conversation with, "What's your biggest regret?" The other person's defenses slam shut like a bank vault. And rightly so. Psychologists Harry Rees and Philip Shaver, who mapped out how intimacy actually develops, showed it works like a spiral. One person reveals something small, the other responds with care and reveals something back. And that response makes the next, slightly deeper revelation feel safe. Trust isn't declared, it's built, one exchange at a time, like climbing a ladder rung by rung. Skip 3 rungs and you fall. Principle 2. Reciprocity. This is the one almost everyone gets wrong. The questions only work if both people answer every single one. The moment only one person is answering, it stops being a conversation and becomes an interrogation. Or worse, a job interview. Aron's procedure is ping pong, not target practice. You ask, they answer. You answer the same question yourself, and your honesty is what buys their next level of honesty. Vulnerability is a currency, and the exchange rate is strictly 1-to-1. Escalation plus reciprocity. A ladder, climb together. That's the entire engine, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every deep conversation you've ever accidentally stumbled into, that 3 a.m. talk with a college roommate, that strangely honest exchange with a seatmate on a long flight, was running on this exact engine without you knowing it. Aron just wrote down the source code. But knowing the engine exists and knowing how to drive it are two very different things. Because the obvious next question is, what do you actually ask? What are these questions that can crack open a stranger in under an hour? And why does each one work? Some of them will look almost suspiciously simple. One is about a dinner guest. One is about a phone call. And one of them, the one about how you'd spend your final year alive, is so powerful that people who answer it honestly sometimes learn something about themselves they'd been avoiding for a decade. In the next chapter, I'm going to walk you through the questions one by one and show you the psychological lockpick hidden inside each of them. And I'll warn you now, after you hear question number 4, you're going to want to pause this video and ask it to somebody. Here's a question that sounds like small talk, but is secretly an X-ray. If you could invite anyone in the world to dinner, who would it be? Go ahead, answer it yourself, right now, before you read another word. Got a name? Good. Because whoever you just pictured, a dead philosopher, a rock star, your grandfather, you didn't just pick a dinner guest. You accidentally revealed what you worship, what you're missing, and what you wish you were. And the person across the table heard all of it. That's the thing about Aron's questions. They look innocent. They are not innocent. Every single one is a lockpick, and in this chapter, I'm going to show you which lock each one opens. Let's start with why the dinner guest question outperforms the classic, "So, what are your hobbies?" A question that has murdered more conversations than bad breath. Ask about hobbies and you get an inventory. I swim. I collect stamps. A fact. A dead end. Ask about the dinner guest and you get a choice. And choices leak values. He says Muhammad Ali. And now you can ask why, and he tells you about discipline, or defiance, or his dad who loved boxing. She says Marie Curie, and suddenly you're talking about being underestimated. One question, and you're already 3 layers down. There's a technique in engineering called the 5 whys. Keep asking why until you hit the root cause. It works exactly the same on humans, except the root cause is always a story, and the story is always worth hearing. Psychologist Dan McAdams at Northwestern has argued for decades that people don't carry facts about themselves. They carry narratives, and identity itself is a story we tell. These questions work because they hand the other person a microphone for the story they've been waiting to tell. Question 2. Would you like to be famous? In what way? On the surface, celebrity nonsense. Underneath, pure ambition detection. Here's the trick. Most people cannot say, "I want to matter" out loud. It feels arrogant, exposed, embarrassing. But wrap the same confession in a hypothetical, and suddenly it's safe. I guess I'd want to be famous for inventing something that helps people. There it is. He just told you what he wants his life to mean, and he barely noticed he did it. This is why Aron's early questions are all slightly hypothetical, slightly playful. They're a costume party for the truth. People will tell you almost anything as long as they're technically talking about something else. Question 3 sounds so trivial you'll laugh. Before making a phone call, do you ever rehearse what you're going to say? And then you ask it, and something strange happens. The other person's face does a little flicker of recognition, and they say, "Oh my God, yes!" And suddenly, you're not strangers anymore, because that tiny confession, "I rehearse, I get nervous, I care what people think of me," is universal and almost never spoken. You've just discovered you share a secret. Behavioral scientist Nicholas Epley, who wrote the book Mindwise about how badly we misread other minds, ran a famous series of experiments with Juliana Schroeder, where they paid commuters to talk to strangers on trains. Everyone predicted it would be awkward and miserable. Every group, introverts included, reported the exact opposite. The conversations were the best part of their commute. The study was called Mistakenly Seeking Solitude, and its conclusion is one of the saddest sentences in social psychology. We avoid the very conversations that would make us happiest because we're wrong about how they'll go. Now, question 4. I told you about this one. If you could live to 90 and keep either the mind or the body of a 30-year-old for the last 60 years, which would you choose? Watch what this question does. It's absurd. It's impossible. Nobody's offering the deal, and yet the answer is never really about aging. It's about what a person is most afraid to lose. The guy who picks the body tells you about his father's decline, or how running is the only place his head goes quiet. The woman who picks the mind tells you she watched her grandmother forget her name, and she'd take any wreckage of a body over that. You asked a silly hypothetical about the future, and you got their deepest fear about the present. That's the mechanism. Questions about someday are always confessions about right now. From there, Aron's list shifts gears, away from hypotheticals into lived experience. What do you consider your greatest accomplishment? And its shadow twin, which you should always ask right after. What about your biggest failure? Interviewers ask this one constantly. And when a candidate claims they've never really failed, every experienced interviewer hears the same thing. This person is either lying, hiding, or has never attempted anything difficult. A life with no failures on record is a life lived entirely inside the guardrails. But ask it outside a job interview, with no stakes, no scorecard, and something else happens. People almost never get asked to narrate their own turning points. You watch them realize in real time that the failure they're describing is the thing that built them. Sometimes you can see it hit them mid-sentence. Then the memory questions. What's your warmest memory? What's your heaviest one? And here I need to hand you a warning label, because this is where amateurs cause damage. If the person across from you is still inside their grief, if the wound is open, not scarred, do not drag them into it for the sake of a deep conversation. The move that separates connection from interrogation is one sentence, spoken before they answer. If you don't want to go there, don't. That sentence sounds like it closes a door. It does the opposite. Safety is the thing that opens people. Pressure is the thing that shuts them. David Brooks, in his book How to Know a Person, calls people who create this kind of safety illuminators. People whose attention makes others feel bigger, not examined. The question matters less than the exit you leave them. And then there's the summit. If you knew that exactly 1 year from today your life would end, what would you change? I'm not going to pretend this is a casual question. It's not. But listen to what it does. Nobody answers it with, "I'd finally clear my inbox." They answer with people. "I'd call my brother. I'd take my mom to the coast. I'd quit the job, say the thing, build the house, forgive the friend." In 60 seconds, this question extracts a person's entire value system. The real one, not the LinkedIn version, and lays it on the table between you. And here's the uncomfortable bonus. While they're answering, a voice in your own head is quietly asking, "And what would you change?" This question interrogates both of you at once. Bronnie Ware, a palliative care nurse who sat with the dying for years, recorded their answers in the top 5 regrets of the dying, and they match almost word for word. I worked too much. I hid my feelings. I lost touch with the people I loved. The dying have no reason left to lie. This question lets you borrow their honesty about 50 years early. One more cluster, and it might be the most practical of all. What does friendship mean to you? What does love mean to you? I know, it sounds like a dorm room philosophy session, but think about what couples actually fight about. She says, "You don't love me." He says, "I work 60 hours a week for this family. What do you call that?" And they're both right, because they're running 2 different definitions of the same word. He was raised where love means providing. She was raised where love means presence. Nobody ever put their dictionaries side by side. Researcher Gary Chapman built an entire framework, the 5 love languages, on exactly this collision. And whatever you think of the framework, the core diagnosis is bulletproof. Most relationship conflict isn't a failure of love, it's a failure of translation. 20 minutes spent comparing definitions at the start of a relationship can quietly delete a decade of future arguments. So that's the tour. Questions that reveal values through dinner guests, ambitions through fame, fears through impossible bargains, identity through failures, and entire belief systems through a single year left on the clock. And I know exactly what you're feeling right now, because everyone feels it at this point. These are great, and there is no way I can pull this off. I can't just turn to my wife over fried potatoes and announce, "If you died in a year, what would you change?" She'll ask me what podcast did this to me. You're right. Deployed wrong, these questions land somewhere between a therapy ambush and a police interview. There is a right way in, a way to raise the depth without raising the alarm. And there are 3 mistakes that kill these conversations before they start. Almost everybody makes all 3. That's chapter 3. The most honest conversation of your life will probably happen with someone you never see again. Think about it. The stranger on the overnight train, the seatmate on a long-haul flight, the person at the hostel bar in a city you'll never revisit. People confess things to strangers that their own spouses have never heard. Psychologists actually have a name for this, the stranger on a train phenomenon. And once you understand why it works, you'll understand everything about why deep conversations fail at home. A stranger is safe for one reason. There are no consequences. They can't use your secret against you tomorrow because there is no tomorrow. They have no file on you, no expectations to disappoint, which means the real enemy of intimacy was never distance, it's stakes. And your job, if you want these questions to work with people who actually matter, is to lower the stakes on purpose. Here's how. And here are the 3 mistakes that will blow it all up. Mistake number 1, the ambush. You watched this video, you're fired up, and tonight at dinner you turn to your partner of 15 years and drop out of a clear blue sky. What's your most shameful memory? Their fork stops in midair. What did you read? Who have you been talking to? Are we okay? Here's the thing. The question wasn't wrong. The delivery was. Deep questions arriving with 0 warning don't feel like curiosity. They feel like an audit. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Say why you're asking. Out loud. Something like, I realized recently that I know your coffee order and your work schedule, and I've somehow stopped learning new things about you. I hate that. Can I ask you something weird? That's it. That one sentence of honesty changes the entire frame, from interrogation to invitation. And it works because of what you're actually saying underneath. I want to know you as a person, not just as my husband, my wife, my mother, my roommate. Not the function, the human. Almost nobody in your life has ever said that to them. Watch what it does to their face. Mistake number 2, playing prosecutor. You ask, they answer. You ask the next one, they answer. And congratulations, you've reinvented the job interview. Remember the engine from chapter 1? Reciprocity. Every question you ask, you also answer. And here's the advanced version. Answer first. If you want to ask about their biggest failure, offer yours before they've said a word. Researcher Brené Brown, who spent 2 decades studying vulnerability and wrote Daring Greatly about it, found something that flips our intuition on its head. We think vulnerability looks weak, but only in ourselves. In other people, we read it as courage. When you go first, you're not exposing yourself. You're posting the safety instructions. You're demonstrating, live, that the water is deep but nobody drowns here. The other person's honesty will almost always rise to match the level you set. Rarely above it, never below it. Mistake number 3, and this one is the silent killer. Treating it like a test. Racing through questions like a checklist, keeping score, waiting for the right answer, getting visibly disappointed by the wrong one. The moment the other person senses they're being graded, the conversation is clinically dead. It just hasn't stopped moving yet. This is a game, not an exam. Nobody gets a certificate. Aron's strangers took 45 minutes, but real conversations don't respect timers. If one question eats the entire evening because the answer turned into a story, and the story turned into a memory, and the memory turned into something neither of you had ever said out loud, that's not failing the exercise. That is the exercise. Don't schedule depth. Plant it and let it grow at its own speed. Save the questions in your Notes app, keep 3 or 4 in your back pocket, and deploy one when you feel the moment open. The long drive, the kitchen at midnight, the walk home. One question, fully lived, beats 36 performed. Now, the deep end. Because Aron's list doesn't stay polite. The final set includes questions like, when did you last cry in front of another person? And invitations to share the most embarrassing moment of your life. And here, culture puts its thumb on the scale. Hard. Millions of men were raised on some version of boys don't cry. Psychologists call the result normative male alexithymia, an actual trained inability to put feelings into words. So understand what you're really asking when you ask a man when he last cried. You're asking him to break a rule he's been following since he was 6. If he answers, if he actually tells you, you haven't just learned a fact about him. He's handed you something he's shown maybe 2 people in his life. Guard it accordingly. Because in the age of screenshots and group chats, one leaked confession doesn't just end a conversation. It teaches a person that opening up was a mistake. And that lesson can hold for years. The old rule of the train compartment has to be spoken out loud now. What's said here stays here. Say it. Mean it. It's the cheapest trust you'll ever buy. And one more question from the deep end that sounds minor and is anything but. Are there things you think should never be joked about? And its quiet twin, is there anything you're not ready to talk about yet? This is you asking for a map of the minefield before you go walking. Every person carries topics that are load-bearing. A dead parent, a lost pregnancy, a bankruptcy, a faith. And in your family, maybe people always joked about that kind of thing. Warmly, no harm meant. In theirs, maybe that exact joke is a knife. You will never know until you either ask or step on it. Couples who exchange this map early don't just avoid fights, they earn a strange kind of trust. Because I know what hurts you and I've never once touched it, is one of the most convincing forms of love there is. And notice what not ready yet implies. Yet. You're not demanding the whole vault today. You're establishing that the vault has a door and that you're willing to wait outside it. Sometimes that patience does more than any question on the list. So here's where all of this lands. 80+ years of the Harvard study, and the verdict hasn't moved. The people who flourish aren't the richest or the fittest. They're the ones with someone who truly knows them. Not lives in the same house knows them. Knows them. And the brutal, liberating punchline of Arthur Aron's little 45-minute experiment is that being known was never a lottery ticket. It's not chemistry, not luck, not soulmates. It's a ladder. Escalation and reciprocity. One honest exchange buying the next. And the ladder has been sitting there, published in an academic journal since 1997, waiting for someone to climb it. Strangers in a lab managed it in under an hour. You have people you've loved for decades sitting across the dinner table. So here's your assignment, and it's deliberately small. Tonight. Not this weekend, not on vacation, tonight. Take one question from this video. Just one. The dinner guest, the phone call, the year left to live if you're feeling brave. Slip it into an ordinary conversation with someone who matters. Tell them why you're asking, answer it yourself first, and then do the hardest part. Stop talking and listen like it's the last conversation you'll ever have with them. Because one day, without warning, it will be. And while you're deciding, drop the answer to the very first question in the comments. Who's your dinner guest? I read every one, and last time I asked something like this, the comment section turned into the best conversation on this channel. Subscribe if you want more tools like this. And next time, I'll show you why the advice, just be a good listener, is almost completely wrong, and what the best listeners actually do instead. See you there!